Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Black Expat Experience, a podcast highlighting the lived experiences of Black expats around the world. I am Kendall Tyson, your host, a licensed therapist and a fellow Black expat living in Beijing. And I always say this every episode, but it's always true. We have another great show for you today, and I would like to welcome our newest guest, Dr. Londi, to the show. Hi there.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
You are so welcome. So this has been a labor of love of trying to get connected and find a date that works because we're both busy clinicians.
Yes.
But I definitely want to give you an opportunity, what we call like the elevator pitch, to introduce yourself to the community.
Yeah. So my name is Dr. Londí. I'm originally from California. I've lived abroad for going 10 years, actually next month or in 2 months. So I've been abroad for just about 10 years. I started in Spain and then went to England, and then now I'm here in Japan, and I work as an international psychologist, which is actually what my degree is in. So I live abroad, but my degree itself is in international psychology.
I love that. So you are definitely the quintessential Black expat moving from location to location in your work. And clearly, I love the fact that you're doing mental health abroad, and in a different sense. Yours is not necessarily attached to like working in a school, is it?
No. Nope. I do have some school age children every so often. And actually, when I first started abroad, I was always in a mental health clinic, but I was in England. I was one of the child trained therapists, actually the child trained therapist. So I was seeing children as young as 3 years old.
Wow.
And so I kind of got known around the schools, even though I wasn't in the school. Everybody was like, oh, you have to go see this provider in mental health. And so the kids at school would be like, oh, do you see, I wasn't doctor then, but like, oh, do you see Miss Cox, or, like whatever the case is. But no, I don't work in a school.
Yeah, I'm trying to get on that frequency. It's like I enjoy working in the school, but one of the things I don't like is having to answer to other people, all the bureaucracy, politics, tape. And so I'm really happy to hear that you are actually doing this work that myself and so many other clinicians that I know abroad are trying to venture into. So we'll definitely get into that, during the conversation.
Yeah.
So I think one of the first questions that I do want to ask you is, how did you get into working abroad? I think you said Spain was the first birth, right?
Yeah, Spain was first. So originally from Los Angeles, but I was living in Oregon at the time. So I'm under my master's degree, so I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I got licensed in Oregon. And there were 2 therapists there who were bilingual, and I found out that they were making more money than me because they were bilingual. So then I told my supervisor, I said, hey, I'm gonna move to Spain, I'm gonna learn Spanish, and then I'm gonna come back as a bilingual therapist, and then you're gonna pay me what you're paying them. And so she was like, okay. So I was like, keep my position open for a year, because I just really felt that as long as I was already taking Spanish classes, but I was like, if I could just immerse myself in the culture and force myself to learn Spanish, I'm sure I could. So that's what got me overseas. I had just gotten licensed. So I was like, this is a perfect time to kind of pause, because if I take a year off and my CEUs aren't due for another year, I'll be back in America by then. So I moved overseas, was a full-time student, 8 hours a day. I was just learning Spanish. And then in the evening, I was teaching English to the children in the host family that I was staying with. And so about 6 months in, I said, you know what, I'm not going back to America. I don't want to go back to America. I just really enjoyed the lifestyle overseas. But what didn't make sense was for me to have gone through all those years of education and not return back to therapy. And I had just gotten licensed before I left. So I had toyed with the idea of getting all of my degrees translated in Spanish so that I could be a therapist there. But with that, I'm sure you are familiar with when we learned in school, they always say to speak in the native language of the person who's, coming to you, because there's just some words that don't translate. And so I said I would be doing myself and the population a disservice, because although I know Spanish, I don't know it to the nature of like if somebody is telling me a traumatic event in Spanish. So then it just became a Google search. I just started Googling LCSWs abroad, LCSWs in Spain, LCSWs outside of the USA. And then I came in contact with this recruiter, I think at the beginning of the year, but she didn't respond until the end of the year. And so when she reached out to me, I thought she had just found me out the blue. But when I looked through the email thread, it was something that I had sent her in like February, and she, finally responded in August. And so she was like, "Hey, so sorry for taking so long to get back to you. There weren't any positions then, and actually we were creating this specific position. Are you interested in moving to England?" And she actually offered me 3 different positions: Japan, England, and Germany. Initially, I took the Japan position. The person in the role decided to renew their contract, so then that one was taken off the table. So then she said, "Okay, Germany or England." And so I just had finished learning Spanish, and I didn't really want to pick up German at that time. And so then I said, "Send me to England because at least it's English speaking." And so that's what got me to England. So before moving to England, I had no idea that I could practice therapy overseas. It was literally just a series of Google searches for months, and then someone just finally responded.
I am so intrigued by that. I think like just with the simple search and then recognizing that you can expand like
Right.
the I don't even know what's the word I'm looking for. Just expand how you really do the work that you do.
Right.
Obviously, we're
Right.
passionate about the work that we're doing, and to know
Right.
that some people say you're not limited, but we actually are recognizing that there isn't a limit to people needing mental health support.
Right. Right. Yep. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I'm curious about you've been abroad 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of my 6th year. And
Okay.
when you kind of recognize that, yeah, I could do this for a while, what was it
Mhm.
that kind of solidified that decision for you to stay abroad?
It was I tell this story often. So there was this one day I was talking to the host father. We would do like language exchanges. And I remember asking him, so it was a 2-parent household and 2 children in the home. So 4 people, excluding me. And so I remember asking him what his dream car was. And he took a while to think about it. And he was like, "I guess anything that fits my family comfortably so that we can like, just travel." And because in Spain, it's really customary, like for summer, for the 3 months of summer, people will leave their house and then they'll have like a beach house down in the south of Spain. And so a lot of times they just drive down there. And so and some of the other countries are interconnected. So people will just drive and, to other countries and, so on and so forth. And so he was saying, like, yeah, whatever could comfortably fit my family so that we can make these experiences, have these experiences. And I was like, "Oh, well, my dream car is a Porsche Panamera, like not for any other reason, like not for family or anything." But I had to realize, like, so obviously I'm from America, I'm from Los Angeles, and my value system then was just completely different. It was all about, I won't say all about, but like majority, if I had to like put a percentage up to it, like majority of it was materialistic, and less experiential. Once I moved to Spain and really interfaced with this family, I think it started to flip. So it was more experiential and then less, materialistic. And so this father, both the mom and the dad at some point had lived in America. But in Madrid, they would have siestas. And initially, I would be so annoyed because I'm like, I'm trying to do things on my lunch break. Like, why are you guys closed? Why are you asleep and spending time with family? And so, but it was just that mindset of like, they're not concerned. They're very successful, very wealthy, but not concerned with climbing the corporate ladder. And so I had this conversation with the host father as well. He was like, I didn't like when I lived in America because there was this expectation to work long hours. And like, if you really wanted this position, you had to like get there early, work through your lunch, work long hours. And he was like, then I was able to do it because I didn't have a family. But he was like, in Spain, we've figured out how to do both. Like the reasons that they have siestas is so that they can work the long hours, but so they're not missing out on time with their family. So a lot of times people think like siesta is nap time, their sleep time. But at least from my experience, the host family will go pick their children up from school for lunch. bring them back to the house. They would have their lunch together. They would maybe like have downtime, nap, but they would have this 3 hours of family time, send the kids back to school. And so the kids would get out of school at 5. The parents would get home a little later, but they weren't missing out on that family time. Like the children didn't have to wait up till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock to see their parents. But their parents were able to work those later hours without missing out on watching their children grow up. So to get back to your question, that's when it shifted for me. Like when I started looking at this point, it was just this country, but I started looking at like the value system of just other countries in general. I'm like, well, what am I chasing? Like, because there I wasn't working long hours and I felt really fulfilled. And so I said, so I mean, the whole reason I moved to Spain was because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go back in Europe and pay me what they pay me. And then in Spain, I made substantially less than what I was making in America and was substantially happier. And so I'm like, so then what, does it even make sense to have this value if it's not conducive?
Yeah, that is, I think, one of the things that I've learned from some of my friends that I've met in Europe is more about the being,
Right.
it's about the doing, like being,
Right.
showing up, enjoying
Right.
experiences, as opposed to living to work for all
Right.
these things, these accoutrements and stuff that
Right.
be perishable anyway, really not going to add value.
Right. Exactly. Yep. I definitely 100% agree.
How do you feel like what would you say if you were to prioritize? You said that your values shifted from kind of being immersed in that environment, and how would you prioritize things now? What would that look like?
I think it's a mix of both. Like, so I don't remember where I heard this. It was a podcast, but there was someone who said, like, when you live abroad, you can do one of three, or you could do two of three things at a time. You can live in luxury, you can save, or you can travel. So you can do two of those things. You can save and you can travel. You can save and live in luxury, but you choose two of those things, and that's kind of like where your resources go. I feel like when I was in Europe specifically, so Spain and England, I feel like, or the United Kingdom rather, I feel like I was doing a lot of saving and traveling. And so now, so that was the more kind of experiential piece. I do a little bit of traveling here, just not as much. I was traveling like literally every weekend when I was in Europe. Here, I think that I live very comfortably and I'm saving. And so I think the only two, like it's flipped in that regard. I still really enjoy cultures. I still really enjoy traveling. Obviously, I enjoy helping people who are traveling, so the expat population. But I think that because I've traveled so much over the last 10 years, the shift is less about, I don't feel like I'm back to the materialistic, component, but I feel like I really enjoy values, but I also, so I like living nicely, and then I like having nice things. But also it is now about saving and building up for it, like whether it's family, my own legacy, whatever the case is.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I didn't think of it. I've not heard that the two of the three, the travel, the save, or was it live well?
Yeah. Live comfortably or luxury.
That makes sense. I think as an expat, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, what would matter most to me in this moment would definitely be saving, because the world is tizzy right now, and I want to, that sense of security and safety is vital.
Right.
And I think right now, living well. Obviously, I love to travel. Traveling for Christmas, going home with the family, going to Portugal just to check it out and be like, is this where I really want to be when I leave Beijing? But yeah, I think once you get to a certain understanding of yourself and what it is, you tell me what you think. What it is that you really want out of life, what it is that you want beyond like this moment. Yeah, like you said, those priorities shift, and then you recognize that there's a lot more beyond the tangible that everybody else has.
Right. Yeah. And I 100% agree. And I think too, for me, when I left America, I was in a different space in my life.
Yeah.
And even though, like, in terms of family dynamics, I still don't have a family of my own, or, different things like that. But I left America to see the world. And so that was my priority, at that point. I was in a space where I was able to make less money, and just, live. I think I had roommates at every housemates, I'll say, like, in every situation that I lived in Spain. In England, it was kind of like that shift, like, okay, now I'm back on my own. But again, I was in a different career space. And so now that I'm here, like, I feel like I've paid my dues. And so now I'm just able to kind of like have a very different lifestyle than I did when I was in Spain. And that feels nice as well. But I use each lifestyle to my benefit. Like, so, when I had to be a little bit more frugal, I was spending more money, on travel. But traveling around Spain at the time, or around Europe, is so inexpensive. And so that worked for me. Part of the reason in England I was traveling every weekend, it cost less to fill up my gas tank than it did to buy a plane ticket. And so it worked for me. Yeah. Now travel is a little bit more expensive here in Asia. Things are like spread out a little bit. And so I've seen those places, but it's just I don't have a desire to go as frequently as I did before. So it also speaks to my the spaces that I was in life, and those components.
I think it always trips me out when I'm like scrolling through Instagram and I see people like detailing their trips and things, especially if they're in Europe, and just the cost of like traveling from, let's just say, Portugal to Spain is less expensive, which is probably a further distance from like through Texas. If I want to fly from one part of Texas to another part of Texas, that's a few $100s. And I'm just like, America is getting it all wrong.
Yes.
Like, there's so much in America that's beautiful that we can see. But I don't know. I just keep thinking, like, why is it sometimes utterly unaffordable to be able to venture throughout your own country and do that plane, train, whatever you want to do? I don't understand it.
I mean, if you think about it, I don't remember it's been so long. I don't remember the duration it takes to get from California to New York, like coast to coast. Is it over 5 hours? Do you know?
Probably on a plane, I would say 5 to 6.
Just about there, right? And so in Spain or in Europe, you would cross so many countries in 5 hours. Like, the span of time, you would be maybe even out of Europe in that time. Is just so small. And so, like, a lot of times when I was going from country to country, it was no more. I was not in the plane for more than 2 hours. And so I think about it in terms of, so in California, you can get from California to Vegas in just under an hour. And that's roughly the price that I was paying to get from California to Vegas is the price that I was paying to get from, I don't know, Spain to maybe France, or, like, whatever the case is. And so maybe it has to do with duration and stuff, because America is just so large. And so when we think about leaving the country, it's because we have to get out of America first. That's a couple of hours, depending on, which way you go and where in the country you are. I mean, I've never paid $1,000 for any trip in Europe. But in America, just for me to get home from Japan, it's going to be at least, $1,000. But I wonder if that, like, the fuel costs and the duration and all of that stuff, I wonder if that has anything to do with it.
Oh, for sure. Like the maintenance, just the logistics. And if we think about now, we're after COVID and there are less direct flights, it's more expensive. We're trying to get back to homeostasis. So it's definitely like a luxury that weeds people out of experiences. Is, can you afford to be able to do this thing? And I don't know, it's interesting. I know I'm excited for my trip home for Christmas.
Oh, that's where you're going?
Yeah, I'm going home. I'm going to Texas for 9 days and Portugal for 6. And I haven't been home since 2018. So for Christmas.
Oh, wow.
We were locked down here in China for 3, probably longer. And then when they started, letting flights happen, it was after like 40,000 quad to go a few hours, just ridiculous. So yeah, I appreciate the value shifts and really kind of explaining that. I'm gonna go unpack that for myself. So thank you for offering that. I'm curious about how are you enjoying living in Japan?
I'm enjoying it. I think again, so going back to that value switch, I think that if I was in the space where I'm like, oh, I just want to see the world, it might be really difficult for me. Because part of the reason I was able to travel as much in Spain is like I was saying, because things were so geographically close. So I wasn't really taking time off work. I would leave on a Friday, be back Sunday evening, and ready for work. Whereas here things are spaced out a little bit more. And so like I would need to take that time off. I told myself I had visited Japan once before moving here, and I told myself when I visited I wasn't coming. I would never live here. But the reason is because I visited in the dead of winter. I went to Tokyo or a couple of places in mainland, and then I had only lived in California at that point, so I'm used to like the warmer climates, and it was just so cold. But I was randomly scrolling on Instagram when I was living in England, and I saw like one of the most beautiful beaches I've seen ever. And I was like, I just felt this draw to like, I need to live there. Like, not even I want to visit, I need to live there. And it just so happened to be Okinawa. And so I didn't know that Japan had warmer climates to offer like like beautiful beaches. And I didn't know that it had this. And so I say all of that to say I think I'm really enjoying it because it is like living in Hawaii, essentially. So the weather is nice, the beaches are nice, the people are really nice. It's one of the what is it called? I think it's called the Blue Belt, like area. So just the pace is slower, the food is healthier, like fast food. I don't eat it often, but if I do, like it's just healthier. It's a healthier option. And I am in this space where like life is busy, but if I can control it, it's slowing down a little bit. I don't feel like I'm on the go as much as I used to be. And so I think that that's why in this phase, like what I said, like the luxury, the travel, the saving, like I'm valuing just the like having the space set up to just come home and live in peace. And then when I want to get out, I just do little road trips on the weekends, travel different places, but I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying what Okinawa has to offer. And then if I want the city life, I just hop on a plane, go to mainland for a little bit. So I'm really, really enjoying it here.
It's really serene. One of the places I really want to get to is Kyoto.
Mhm.
Here that it's really, really beautiful. It's I don't remember if it's the place that has like the just massive cherry blossom trees everywhere, or is that all of Japan?
It's not all of, so every place has like its own, like we have cherry blossom season, and we have different variations. But there is one specific place in Japan, and I don't know if it's there, that has like the most beautiful, like it is known as a cherry blossom place.
Okay, I think I've seen
Yeah.
this somewhere. I'm just
Yeah.
really excited. Like living in Asia, depending on which part of Asia you live in, can be can be interesting. And I'm wondering, like, when you moved to Japan, were there any type of culturally shocking experiences that you
Mm,
had?
not so much. Well, let me think. I was gonna say not so much when I moved here. So I did have like one situation, and I don't know that I was really shocked as opposed to like, okay, like, because after being abroad for so long,
Really?
like, yeah.
Right.
Me and some girlfriends, we were in Tokyo, and celebrating a friend's birthday. And so we went to, where did we go? We went to dinner, and then we had the taxi drop us off at like some little like nightclub or whatever. And so the guy was like, "Oh, you guys aren't allowed in." And so we're like, "Well, is it at capacity?" And just kept saying, "You no." And then once we saw other people being able to go in, we're like, so it's always unclear, like, are we not able to go in because we're Black? Are we not able to go in because we're women? Are we not able to go in because we're American? So it is, that was one of the experiences, because I'm like, gosh, I guess experienced that in Japan yet, and I hadn't experienced it in so long. Now I experienced it in Korea, but I think I expected it in Korea because I mean it's just more prevalent. Like you just know that there's a lot of colorism that goes on in Korea.
Yeah.
And so that was a one-off experience in Japan. Outside of that, everything has been really amazing. Like, quite honestly, like, because I don't speak Japanese, so to be in this country, knowing the tumultuous history that America has with Japan and the Japanese population still be welcoming of Americans and still like pulling out their translation apps to help, still going out of their way to, you know, provide services. It's actually really, I guess, humbling in so many ways, because I just think about the close proximity that Mexico is to America, and people who come and don't speak English, the type of treatment that they get is very different than the type of treatment I get coming all the way overseas, not speaking Japanese, but I'm still welcomed, where in America, that's not always the case.
Yeah, it makes you think, like, just how different life can be, considering like the historical context of everything that happened before we even made the decision to venture into these places.
Exactly.
I'm really curious, like, so in the work that you and I do and being abroad doing that work, I wonder, what would you say to a clinician that's curious about and wondering how to expand their life by coming abroad? Like, would there be any advice that you'd offer them, or just different ways of thinking about things?
You said to a clinician specifically?
Yeah, folks that do
Well,
it.
yeah, so I think the one thing is, so with my degree, I think before I got my doctorate degree in international psychology, I always just thought in this kind of psychology mindset, this overarching psychology mindset. I think if someone is thinking to practice overseas, or, you know, with in whatever capacity, even if it's not so much practicing overseas, but it is working in the school system or being an expat, working in their whatever respective business, I think it is having that cultural consideration. You know, that things are just sometimes different. Like I talked about Spain, like how in America we're used to working through our lunch breaks, whereas in Spain, like things completely shut down. And so if you're not knowledgeable of some of those cultural situations, considerations, it can be really frustrating. It can be really, really frustrating. And so I think that not automatically assuming that things will be the same, almost setting up your reality to know that things won't be the same. This is not the same thing. But when I was living in Spain, imagine, so I was sick. I was really, really sick. And so I had to go to the store to buy medicine, not knowing that most of the medicine in Spain is at the pharmacy. They don't have it at the grocery store. And then the other component, I remember I was looking for cough drops, and I asked this lady, I was like, hey, do you know where the cough drops are? And she was like, oh, it's in the candy section. And I'm like, why? It's not candy though. Like, why would it be there? And so I really thought that she didn't understand me. And sure enough, I went to the candy section and it was there. So imagine like being sick, not feeling your best, not knowing the language, and then now you're just really frustrated. So I use that as an example to kind of like generalize to a larger kind of transition. The transition is going to be tough because it's transition. But if you go in it with this mindset of like, oh, well, I know where the cough drops are, or I know how, because I'm a therapist, I know how to get through this thing. I think you could set yourself up for failure, because it's just going to be different than any experience that you might have experienced. Even I've moved internationally. This is my third time. And this transition was different, you know, from the other ones, just because it's a different country. It's a different culture. It's a different language. And then in terms of practicing psychology, this is where I was going with America. If I'm not mistaken, I will say America makes up less than 10% of the world population. I want to say it's 5, but I'm going to give myself that buffer. And so to apply psychology to cultural, what do you call it, to cultural groups, if you will, from one lens, from one American lens, is doing us a disservice, is doing the people that we serve a disservice. And so that's the advice that I would give to therapists who move abroad. Like, make sure we're taking into consideration the cultural practices and the cultural norms and nuances of the population that we serve, and not just like, oh, you need psychotropic medication, or you need this, or meditation, or, whatever the case is, because some cultures use shamans, some culture, do talk to their ancestors or do talk to their family members. Other people don't believe in therapists. And so it is like, how are we going to take these other considerations outside of this myopic American lens and apply it forward?
Yeah, you're speaking to something that makes a lot of sense to me, and that has been literally the underpinning since I've been working international, well, back home and working internationally, is just this understanding of cultural humility that you're describing. It's really being open to everyone else's experience, especially if you're working in that culture and that community. They supersede your own understanding of, or at least when you're working with them as a clinician. Just really coming from a place of openness, and really coming from a place, not coming from a place of, what's the word I'm looking, like superiority, right? Well, we know best, and we know the healthiest way to approach a situation, when in every case, that's not necessarily true, because work that I've done in the States and the way that you approach treatment and support in China, I've been in China the entire time, are vastly different. Some similarity, but the acceptance and understanding of like mental health and seeking support are going to be met with a different level of
right.
And I just wish that even back in the States, we could get to that understanding that multiculturalism should be the foundation of all the work that we're doing, because even though we're Black women, our existence and the way that we grew up are still very different. So there are subcultures within the culture. Like you being a woman from California and me being a woman from Texas, our upbringings are probably similar, but really different. And so the way that like our symptoms might present, or the type of treatment that we might need, wouldn't be cookie cutter at all. And I think that's something that I'm noticing with other counselors in the international school system having a struggle with, is stepping outside of that mindset of being the expert and I'm going to fix people. It's been a labor of love to get them to kind of expand their understanding of you're not. You just have a certain amount of knowledge. How do we apply it to the context?
Right.
Yeah. I want to talk like, so tell me, what are you, before you move into like this real deep mental health conversation, which has been already, like at this vantage point, this point in your life, what would you say is something that you're really, really proud of accomplishment wise?
I would say two things. So the first is I moved to England with absolutely no money. I moved out the country with a little bit of money in my savings, but because I was still paying student loans, and just kind of like there were some residual payments that I had to pay. So like because my salary was low in Spain, because I was just a student. So I think I was making 60 euros a week, if I'm not mistaken, like really, really, really low. But everything was taken care of, like, housing was taken care of, food, like all of that kind of stuff. So I was in a place where I could do that. My savings was, good enough. And then everything was taken care of. But by the time I left Spain, I had gone through my savings account to the point where I had this job. I had the job in England, and they needed everything to be hand signed, like wet signed, and then like sent to them. And I didn't have the money to print the document. And so I was like, oh, let me go to the ATM. And so like, to at least like pull something out. And so whatever the funds were in there was below 20 euros. So it might have been $20 in there, but it was below 20 euros. So I couldn't pull it out. And so I remember walking around Spain on my lunch break randomly, just looking for change on the ground, because I'm like, I literally only need a quarter. Like, I mean, whatever the equivalent to a quarter was. And I'm like, and because I had a little bit of change, but I was like a quarter short. And I was like, I literally only need this. Like, I have a promise of a 6-figure job, and I literally don't have the money to pay to like print this paperwork for it. I was so annoyed and so frustrated. So I say that to say, I think one of the things that I'm most proud of is like being, I said this before, like being in America and being broke is kind of one thing because you have your support network. You have like, okay, I'm gonna go to my mom's house. I'm gonna just eat over here, or I can, stay here. Like I can move back home. But
Gotta go sell
in
me some
America,
money.
I just didn't have that. And I didn't tell anybody that I didn't have it, like tell anybody back home, because obviously people would have worried, like, girl, you are out the country and you don't have anything. And so I think when I look back on that, so I ironically enough, I found a quarter on the ground like that. I was like walking and praying and there was a quarter. So I did find the quarter. I printed the documents and then ended up moving to England. And so during that time, I think for the first part, so I talked about the three things you could do. The first part, like I built up my savings, and I traveled. That was the initial piece. But in looking back and seeing where my life is now, I think I'm really proud of, like, I literally made something out of nothing in that scenario. Like I didn't fold, I didn't go back home. It was just like, yeah, how can you make this work? And so that is one thing I'm most proud of. And then the other is starting my private practice while being overseas.
Yeah, I'm so happy for you. I'm glad the Lord came through with that quarter.
Right. Right, me too.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. It's in them like ram in the bush moments. Be like, okay, something needs to work out here. You know what? One thing that I recognize that seems to be a through line for a lot of the people that I interview or people that I just talk to abroad anyway is I think we tend to have a different type of determination, like a determined will and spirit.
Yeah.
And that is often tested while living abroad, especially considering the culture that you're immersing yourself in. But I don't know. I keep thinking, like, what is it that keeps us doing this year after year after year? What do you think?
For me, it is like, even with the challenges that therapy provide, the challenges that overseas provide, it is like recognizing that life is going to have its own challenges anyway. And for me, living abroad just provides another level of peace. And so, like, if I'm going to have the challenges, but I can have this level of fulfillment or this level of peace, then to me the good outweighs the bad. I think too, it also depends on what your long-term goals are. So I've been toying with the idea. So I'm in my last year of contract with where I am now. And so I've been toying with the idea, like, am I going to extend? Am I going to stay? Am I going to go back to the States? And so for a while my mindset was like, okay, I think it's time to go back to the States, because when I moved overseas, not the only reason, but I moved overseas to see the world. And to be a therapist. And so I've seen the world. I'm a therapist. And so, like, now I'm just living away from my family. But then I've set some other goals that staying overseas would expedite those goals. And so now I'm just like, okay, well, the end still justifies the means. And so I think that it depends on what your long-term goals are. Like, if it's to see the world, then I would say that. If it's to maybe like start a family, like, sometimes living overseas isn't the most conducive environment for meeting someone that maybe has the same cultural values as you do, or whatever the case is, in starting a family. And so I think it's a matter of considering what your long-term goals are. But for me, the goals align with the goals of living abroad align with my personal goals. It's just the ease of life here. I think it was Friday, I didn't feel like driving. I go on walks to clear my mind. And so I was like, I don't feel like cooking. I don't feel like driving. I'm just going to walk up the street to get something to eat. And the sun set, I think, around 5:30. So it was like pitch black and I felt completely safe. And I remember, like, as I was walking, I'm like, I would never do this in America. I need to be I don't care where in America I am. I just need to be indoors before the sunset, like walking by myself as a single, woman. Like, I just would never do that. And so there's a sense of security, a sense of safety. Actually, this morning I woke up and realized I forgot to lock my front door, and I was like, oops. And that was it. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, Londí, you can't do that. It's just
Ain't nobody in my place.
Right. Yeah. So it's just a different, it's a safety, it's a sense of peace. There's different kind of financial benefits to being, overseas. So for me, the quality of life is just better.
Yeah. Yes, I fully agree with you. I think one of the when we talk about values that I find to be really important is security and safety. Especially being like a single woman, want to be married at some point, but that's just not my reality right now. And it always astounds me, like you said, I could literally walk down the streets of Beijing, dead of the morning. Nothing is going to happen to me. Nobody is even thinking about harming me. And there are
Right.
multiple reasons why. But
Right.
I find this to be so weird that I feel so much safe and secure and free outside of the United States than I do
Yeah.
when I am back home in the continental United States. It feels love my family, love being American. Don't want anybody to think that I don't. But
Right.
it feels a lot more restrictive and like I need to look over my shoulder and make sure um, that we're not in a place that's going to be unsafe and unsecure. Like just with everything that's happening, shoot, especially in Texas, um,
Yeah.
you can be at the gas station or the grocery store or church or at school and anything could pop off. And that's never been anything that I've had to concern myself with living in Beijing. Like Beijing has its other challenges, don't get me wrong, but that's never been one of them. And I think that's always when I think about the place that I want to live next, being Portugal, you know, talking to women, talking to families, talking to people that I know that connected with locals, safety is one of the top five values that are really, really important for me living abroad, being single. So I really connect with what you shared. I want to kind of shift to we have just a little longer. I really want to shift into when you made the decision and what that process looked like for you to begin your practice and
Mhm.
for us to really talk about Black mental health abroad, like trends that you're noticing,
Yeah.
what it is that you do to care for yourself as a clinician, because God knows if we don't do that, nothing else gets done. So yeah, I just said a whole lot. So let's start with what did that process look like for you when you decided I really want to take the bull by the reins, the horse by the reins? I got that idiom completely wrong.
I thought it was
Is it bull
cool, but it
by
might
the
be different.
nose, horse by the reins? I have no idea. Take
Don't have.
control.
Yeah.
When you decided that you wanted to start your own practice.
Yeah. So, I came up with the idea in England and I didn't execute it until I lived in Japan. And I'm trying to remember actually, so there was so I was in my doctorate program and there was a friend of mine who was helping me study for my comp exams, my comprehension exams. And I think every transition I toy with the idea of moving back to America and it just never resonates with me. I'm always like, it just feels like a identity loss. Like, okay, I'll move back to America, and even though that is my culture, like it just, I'm like, well, what am I do? Like, what can I do on the weekends if I can't go to another country? Like, it just doesn't, it just hasn't resonated with me yet.
Right.
And so I was talking to him about this. He's a counselor as well. And I was saying, you know what? I think I'm going to move back to the States and I'm going to open my private practice. And I said more specifically, so this is around the time that it was in COVID. So we saw what happened to George Floyd, and there was just a lot of other Black people who were dying at the hands of police brutality and shootings and, so on and so forth. And I was like, I just feel like little Black girls specifically, I was like, I just feel like little Black girls kind of like need this representation and need this therapy. And so he said, yeah, you can move back to the States and open your private practice. And he was like, or you could stay overseas and you can open your private practice and be an example to little Black girls of what success also looks like. And so he was like, it doesn't have to, because like for so many, it's just like, oh, it's success within, like, coloring within the lines, like within the context of the American borders. But he was like, you're killing it overseas. And he was like, if you want to come home. But like, if you're coming home for the, like, let me be an example, he was like, you're far of a greater example, there, than you would be here. And so then I started reconsidering it from that perspective. And then I was thinking, I'm like, when I was in Spain, there was a group that I was in called, oh shoot, Melanin Madrid. And so there were so many people of color in that group who were like, I need a therapist who's English speaking. I need a therapist who understands Black culture. I need a therapist who understands what it means to be Black and abroad. And so once he and I had that conversation, I said, oh, like, let me look into being an expat therapist, because my degree, I was in that program. I said, my degree will be in international psychology. I learned about all these cultures, but also being an expat, I know that I've wanted a therapist who understands this, like, living abroad process, who understands repatriation, who understands, like, the cost of living. Like, I know what I would charge my clients in the States versus what I had when I was living in Spain. And like, I just absolutely would not charge people that price because they don't have it. And so, like, even though people could have went to Spanish therapists, like, if you're not set in your career, if you're going over there for your master's program or whatever, like, you don't have those resources. And so that's when I started revamping it to, like, what did I need when I was in Spain? What would I have liked when I was in England going through these transitions? And so I graduated with my doctorate in international psychology, and that's when I decided to pivot. And so I started my practice right when I got to Japan.
Congratulations. Everything that you're saying obviously resonates with me, because doing the same work over here in Asia, I found it to be really rewarding, but it can become quickly overwhelming because there's not many of us. And people are like, go to Kendall. I think there's 2 Black women here in Beijing. So you're either going to get referred to one of us. And I've at this point have decided I'm not taking on new people because I got to get my mind together about these other things that I'm trying to do. And it's like, it's such a I won't say weird, interesting space to be in, to be the one that's offering these services. And the Black community here in Beijing is very small. So it's kind of like going somewhere and then it's like, okay, I used to be your therapist and I'm still your therapist and I'm your therapist. So I can't be drunk out here. I'm not about to be partying like I'd like to out here. So I can, but it's, should I, that, professional society, I don't know. It's such an interesting space. It's like, how do you bridge the duality of providing the service and then still trying to live your life in the community that you're engaged in?
Yeah, I know, because this island is really, really small. So for me, like, I think for me, when I don't get drunk often, and when I do it off island. Because
good suggestion.
But what was I gonna say? I think for me, like, I just understand community mental health, and it just kind of is what it is. And so when I take on new clients, I kind of give that disclaimer, like, hey, if I see you in the community, if you say something to me, I'll say something to you. If you don't, I'll act like I don't know you. If you introduce me as your therapist, I'll ride with it. If I'm just some girl that like, whatever, I lead with the clients. But then I also let them know, like, you likely will see me out, and you will likely see me out with my friends. And if you come up to me and say, hey, this is my boyfriend, I'm not introducing you to anybody that I'm with, because, like, I just want to make clear what these dynamics are. So I give that to them up front. So they're not like, oh, Dr. Londí is rude. Like, I was trying to, like, I saw her out with her person and I was out with my person. I was trying to introduce the 2 of them. But that's just not, I just kind of like reconfirm what our relationship is. Our relationship is a working environment. We live close, we live on the same island. We will run into each other. Like, these are my boundaries. You let me know what your boundaries are. And, like, let's kind of go with it. But then there is that component, like I said, like the being drunk. I really don't party. I think, a couple of weeks ago, I went to this wine tasting thing. And so it was literally everybody and their mom was there. So I'm like, I probably saw some of my clients. They probably saw me in rare form, but I'm also not going to not go to things and not enjoy things because of that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think like I appreciate that. I think a bit of my social anxiety kind of grips me a bit. And it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, oh my God, what are people gonna think? And it's just like people will think what they want. Um,
Right.
but that shouldn't
Right.
stop you from living the life that you live, especially if you've chosen to do this work in the community that you live in. So yeah, that does make sense, what you're saying. I'm really curious about what are some of the trends that you're noticing that your clients are like
Mm-hmm.
experiencing, like beyond the anxiety and depression, because we know that hits
Yeah.
differently, especially if you're Black and abroad. Um,
Yeah.
or I don't even want to answer that for you. Like, what is it that you're recognizing?
One of the ones I see quite frequently, like year around, is almost this like toxic positivity. Like, oh, I shouldn't feel bad because I live abroad. Like, I know that I'm living a life that most people don't get to live. And so even though my boyfriend just broke up with me, even though my parent just passed away, even like I should be happy. And I'm like, but you're still human. And these are like, if you were in the States, if you were in your home country, you would still have an emotional reaction to this. And this is actually normal. And I mean, we have bad days wherever we are. And so I think there's that. And then there's the flip side of that is that they feel kind of isolated, like even with some of their closest friends from back in their respective homes, because their friends also have this kind of like mindset of what their life is abroad. And so it's this mindset of like, oh, let me tell you about my problems because surely you don't have any problems living in, said place, or, I see how much you get to travel, or, whatever the case is. So you're living the dream. So like, let's shift the focus of, like conversing about this. And so that can be, very isolating because people might feel like they want to keep up that facade. Like I don't want my family to worry or to know that I'm depressed out here or that I'm having bad days. So I can't tell them that I'm really feeling this way. And so that only feeds those conversations of the friends thinking like, oh, you don't need my support. Like, let me continue to talk about me. So I would say that those are the two kind of evergreen ones that I see very frequently. And then I see people who come abroad and they either come abroad with their partner, and one might have a sense of purpose, like I'm coming over here to work. And then the other one is like, I'm coming over because I love you. And then that creates some type of discrepancy, not because of there's a lack of love, but like, hey, I left my career and, like I really want to support you, but also this is really difficult, especially once we start talking about some of those gender roles, like if it's kind of role reversal and the woman's the one who left for a great opportunity and the partner, the male partner, if we're talking about a heteronormative relationship, is the one who is the trailing spouse, if you will, like that can kind of create relationship discord. And then around this time, people might choose not to go home for the holidays, or they go home for the holidays and things are just really different. And then they blame themselves for like missing so much time. Those are some of the seasonal ones I see.
Yeah, all those things make it really difficult, I think, but are very much integral into this whole process, which, when talking to people, interviewing people that are thinking about making the move or that are already abroad, really helping folks to understand that you have to prepare for these very real scenarios that at some point are going to surface in your life. We don't necessarily know when, but you might feel like that sting of regret when I'll speak for myself. My sister has 3 nieces. I love those little girls to life as if I had them myself. And there's been so much regret, like not
Yeah.
being home and being able to fully engage with them as they're growing up. But then I'm like, if you were home, you would be so, so, so busy. So you probably wouldn't, and she live in a whole nother city. So you probably wouldn't even be there like you're thinking that you're missing now. So it's really being a bit more observant and digging into those feelings that are coming up. At least what I'm noticing with people that I'm talking to. So something I've noticed abroad is there are a great number of expats running from something back home.
Yep. Yep.
It's like, how is it that you believe that packing up, moving to another country without resolving or unpacking or getting treated for the thing that's the elephant in your life,
Right.
what is it that makes you think that coming here to a whole nother place and then adding adjustment and culture shock and everything else
Yeah.
in the expat, what makes you think that it's not going to exacerbate it, that it's going to make it, go away?
Yeah.
I'm always curious about that. Is that something that you've noticed, like with people that you're interfacing with abroad?
Yes, yes, definitely. And one of the things that I say quite frequently is wherever you go, there you are. And so it's like, yeah, you might not be experiencing um the situation like up front right now because you're just avoiding it, like you're focusing on the transition, you're focusing on the culture shock. But once everything settles, because that's what happens when transitions are always very temporary. And so once it settles, it's like either you're creating a new problem in your new environment, or I had a client recently who actually left their home country for a considerable amount of years and finally went back, and their repatriation period was really difficult because all of the things that they had run from for 10, 15 years was right back there. So yeah, wherever you go, there you are.
I like that. You just gave me part of the title for this episode. I mean, we've talked before, so I'm glad that we've been able to establish a rapport prior to now. I'm really intrigued about when you think about the things that you need as an expat, as a clinician, as a business owner living abroad, all of these different identities. What does what does your wellness routine consist of?
Ah, that's a good one. So I really like massages.
Yes,
Um,
by them.
You know what? I'm finding I actually didn't know this about myself, but my wellness routine is I love going on walks like that. I just that's where I clear my head.
Yeah.
So if I'm able to get to the beach or to some shore and see a huge body of water, and if it's warm enough to get in, I will get in. And that's always like a recalibrating period for me. But if it like on my lunch break, there's a track right outside. So I'll walk like this path. Or like if I'm at home, I will walk the radius of not my city, but my neighborhood essentially. So walking is a part of my wellness. Journaling is a part of my wellness. Um, I'm I'm quite the opposite. So when I feel like when I moved abroad, I was an extrovert, and now I feel like I'm more of an introvert. And I think that came from this space of like not waiting for people to do things that I want to do. And so that's how I became a solo traveler and different things like that. But in that, I think it changed some of the fabric of my makeup. And so a part of my wellness is like retreating and just being in my own space. And so like whether my own space is if I'm out at an event and I just need some time alone, I might go stand outside for a little bit. I might go sit in my car. On the weekends, it is like having some downtime at home and not filling it with like a whole bunch of things to do. In between clients, it is sitting in nothingness, like not scrolling on social media, not like just sitting in silence. So my wellness journey essentially, or like practices, it's being very intentional about where my energy is and how to either regulate it or get it back up.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We have some very similar wellness practices in common, like massages every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because it is just carrying the stress of other people's challenges and our own. And the way that the world is, like it just needs to be exercised out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love to read, writing. I think being creative is something for me too. But I have to I have to reel that in because then my ADHD brain makes it hard for me to finish stuff because I have all these ideas and it's just like, okay, I got 20 things that I'm working on. I need to finish something. So that's something that I noticed that I'm working on. Well, we are, nearing the end of this amazing interview. I'm so glad that we got a chance to talk mental health, being, fearless Black women living abroad. I am curious about what would you like, if we're thinking specifically mental health abroad, for Black expats, what would you like, what would you hope the advancement of that to look like?
So funny enough, I have a therapist who is Black, and I just sent her a voice note the other day and was just like thanking her for the safe space that she provides, because like I can go to her. There's been times where we've been in session together and we both pop up on the screen and we're like, our hair is tied. She's in England, I'm here, obviously. And so my nights are her early mornings and different things. And so there's not this space where I feel like, okay, in addition to like me having to get my thoughts together for this session, I have to like look a certain way, or, like whatever the case is. And so I think the advancement that I would want is just that place of comfort. Like when we talk about a safe space, a lot of times we're talking about it for our emotional well-being. We're talking about it from our mental health well-being, but like even feeling like I can just show up, as I am. Obviously, I want to take pride in my appearance, but just also knowing that I can, like, this is all safe. Like I don't have to explain like why my hairstyle just changed before we get into the session. I don't have to. There was this person came to me looking for services, and so I was like, oh, what are you doing this weekend? And they were like, oh, I have to take down my hair. And then she paused and she was like, oh, I don't have to explain that to you. And I was like, yeah, no.
Love, right?
Yeah. And so it's just I just want therapy for Black women abroad. Like I still want them to have that space, because even when I remember living in Madrid and like trying to figure out like, well, how do I describe to people, how I want my hair done? Like, because when I'm in the States, I could just say like, oh, I want braids. And you automatically, the one question you might ask is knotless or box braids. But outside of that, if I say I want braids, individuals, if I say cornrows, you know what that means. Like, and there's not this kind of like needing to over explain. And for therapy, I want a space for Black women abroad who don't have to over explain themselves.
Yes, it just feels like home.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to hurry up and find my new therapist as we're having this conversation. Especially with the holidays like right around the corner. I am really grateful for you taking the time to chat and, discuss your journey abroad, like the impact that mental health and being a clinician has made in your life, and how you've just journeyed through these different transition phases. I'm so inspired. And I hope that we stay in touch.
For sure.
Because I've learned, I'm going to go unpack those three,
Yeah.
and values, because I agree. I can see like how mine have shifted. I think there's more. I think I'm recognizing that I seek peace over anything. I seek peace over being out and involved and still feeling alone. I seek peace, and peace just looks different depending on where I am. But I think that is like one of the top things that matter to me at this point as a 42-year-old woman is peace. If it brings peace,
right,
for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping, me expand my thinking on some things and helping me to recognize that there is life as a Black clinician abroad beyond education. So I might be hitting you up about that. And so for everyone that has tuned in to this really impactful episode, I thank you for joining us again on the Black Expat Experience. As always, I encourage you to keep taking risks, keep impacting your communities, and above all, prioritizing your mental health. Please share this episode in your communities of influence. We grow with your support, and make sure that you are living abundantly on purpose. And with that, we'll say bye. Thank you, Dr. Londí.
Having me.